On the 10th of May 2021, China released their once-in-a-decade census that illustrated the demographic challenges the country faces in the coming decades. Receiving an unprecedented amount of external attention, the data confirm that the country is experiencing a slowdown in population growth that has triggered a number of responses from the Chinese government. In 2020, the number of newborns in China dropped to 12 million, the lowest since 1961. The country's fertility rate, which is the average number of children a woman typically has, is roughly 1.3, lower than the US at 1.7 and even Japan at 1.4. While there have been questions about the quality of the census, this does not detract from the core message: China's population growth is slowing. But is population growth even desirable? There has been considerable debate about the role population growth plays in economic development since modern economic theory began. A common argument against a growing population being positive for development revolves around the diversion of capital away from investment and savings. Put more simply, the more children a family has, the fewer resources can be given to each child. Larger families therefore spread the same amount of resources more thinly to support more children. Fewer resources are left for saving and investing in growth-enhancing activities, while also reducing spending on enhancing the economic potential of each child, for example, through education and health expenditures. Despite being the world's second largest economy, China is still a relatively poor country globally in per capita terms. By taking the total value of a country's economy and dividing it by the population, we get the individual wealth of each citizen. And while such a simple metric ignores wealth inequality, it still provides a general idea of how well off the average citizen is in a country. At $10,500 per person in China, compared to $63,500 in the US, the average citizen in China is still a lot poorer than their counterparts in America. Despite China's incredible economic growth since the end of the 1970s, the country still has a ways to go to match the individual levels of wealth seen in developed countries. Broadly speaking, there are two ways to increase a country's GDP: growth in the size of the workforce, so a country can make more things, and an increase in worker productivity, so the individual worker can make more things in the same amount of time. However, by increasing the size of the workforce, a country's wealth has to be split between more people, and so the average wealth per person doesn't change. It is only through productivity growth that income per capita can rise. Therefore, in the context of increasing the average wealth of each citizen in China, the consequences of slowing population growth can be evaluated. The main consequence of population growth slowing down and eventually declining is the impact it has on a country's demographic structure. The key is to avoid an undesirable top-heavy demography where a majority elderly population must be supported by a minority working population. A demographic structure like this one means a large number of elderly, less productive people more reliant on healthcare and pensions must be supported by a proportionally smaller group of productive young people. The burden this mismatch creates diverts the spending of individuals and government away from more productive investments, causing a drag on growth. And because productivity growth is so key to China raising its income per capita, a top-heavy demographic poses a serious risk to China's future development. Slowing population growth is a natural symptom of economic development. As a country becomes more urbanized and wealthy, families tend to have fewer children. Previously, in a largely agricultural society, children could directly raise a family's wealth working as labourers, increasing agricultural output. Moreover, when the parents became too old to work in the field, they could rely on their children to replace and support them. Urbanisation changes this calculus in three major ways. Parents are able to work longer as the work is less labour-intensive. Children depend on their parents for longer due to education becoming more extensive. And the cost of raising a child is significantly higher in an urban setting. Think of all those pens and pencils your parents needed to buy you in your first 18 years at school. Consequently, the incentive and perhaps more importantly, the capacity for adults to have large families decreases, resulting in population growth slowing. Urbanization reducing population growth is not unique to China. but 3 other causes of the country's population slowdown are: firstly, the effects of China's one-child policy are more apparent than ever and have contributed to the country's flagging population growth. Many Chinese adults who are of childbearing age today were born during the one-child policy. This means they alone have the responsibility to support their 2 parents and 4 grandparents, known as the 4-to-1 phenomenon. Living with parents and grandparents is not an uncommon situation in much of East Asia, and the burden that caring for retired relatives creates reduces the resources available to raise children. Another problem the one-child policy caused was the gender imbalance in China today. The country's male population now outnumbers females by as many as 40 million, which may result in many young males not being able to start a family. This gender imbalance could be fixed through immigration, but this is the second major reason for China's population growth slowdown. China has one of the lowest immigration rates in the world. According to the UN, less than 0.1% of China's population are immigrants. That compares to the US's 15.4%. Often of working age, immigrants provide one of the only ways for population decline to not result in a top-heavy demographic structure. However, there is little to indicate the government will begin an immigration drive anytime soon. The third unique cause of China's slowing population growth is the country's internal immigration system known as the hukou. The system provides families access to local social and welfare resources such as education, housing benefits, and medical subsidies. Living in an area where you do not possess a local hukou significantly hinders access to these social services, effectively discouraging internal immigration and exacerbating the rural-urban divide. However, this does not prevent movement towards desirable cities, but instead increases the cost of living for families who relocate to an area where they do not possess a local hukou. For families in these situations, they would have to, for example, send young children to expensive private daycare centres rather than government-subsidised schools. This effectively increases the amount of resources needed to raise a child. Already, the government has begun to enact policies reducing the burden of having children in the hopes of boosting the country's flagging fertility rates. The latest 5-year plan highlights the need for a national strategy in the face of an ageing population. A concrete example given is the goal of increasing daycare facilities for infants. However, one of the more dramatic responses to the demographic crisis China is facing is the government's recent stance towards the private education industry. Newly introduced legislation requires homeschooling or off-campus education companies to register for non-profit status. This comes in response to the notoriously high amount of cram classes and extra tutoring parents often enroll their children in. The overall aims to effectively reduce students' academic burden and households' education spending in 1 year. And while other social aims may have influenced this decision, a desire to make raising children cheaper was no doubt a significant driver. In fact, the government has placed such importance on boosting birth rates that it was prepared to eviscerate the industry and the associated jobs it created. When the legislation was announced, 3 private education companies, Tal Education, Gaotu Tekeju, and New Oriental Education, which previously had a combined market value of more than $26 billion, all fell close to 60% in the first hour of trading following the announcement. Between 2010 and 2020, China's working age population fell more than 3% to 968 million. But higher education rates and technological advancements will boost productivity. There is an ongoing debate about whether modern societies need to continue to grow their populations to maintain consumption-led growth. Has current technology and will upcoming technology allow countries to maintain growth despite population declines? Letting populations decline certainly reduces the burden on the environment, which is becoming one of the most topical issues of the 21st century. How China handles its looming demographic crisis will determine whether it continues on its path towards ascendancy that it started last century, or whether it fizzles out this century. That is, of course, assuming it is not already too late.